mind, well, something to do with maybe changes in the pressure of a container that I have isolated the plant in. That tell me something about this, using the gas laws. Well, and now you have to understand that at this time I knew very little mathematics, but I knew a lot of chemistry, and I was pretty good with my hands and designing experimental setups and equipment. And I had a lot of equipment available to me, so I was basically pulling things off the shelf and putting all this apparatus on this table, and tubes and pipes going on in all directions, pressure gauges, thermometers, and but nothing was working. I would run my experiment, and I was expecting to get some kind of result, and nothing was happening. I just was getting null results all the time, and I couldn't understand why. So I asked one of the roving professors, Dr. Correa was his name. He was just fabulously intelligent and knowledgeable. And I asked him one day, I said, hey, could we talk about what I'm doing over here? I had all this apparatus all over the place. I mean, those guys were so good to me, I couldn't believe it. They let me keep up my gear, in a spot in the big lab, set up all the time, over in the corner. And I said, I'm trying to do this, and I've got this hooked up here, and these pipes over there, and I'm measuring these pressures, and I'm trying to figure out how much oxygen is being generated by this plant by measuring these pressure changes. And he looks at my apparatus, and he listens to what I have to say. He shakes his head, and he says, this isn't going to work. And I thought, wow, how do you know that? How do you know it's not going to work? You haven't, you haven't been over here working on the stuff with me and seeing what I have in mind, and then you can tell me right there that it's not going to work. I was just a little flabbergasted, but I was interested. I mean, I knew the guy knew what he was talking about, but I was curious as to how he knew right away. And so I asked him, okay, how do you know? How do you know it's not going to work? He says, well, here's why. He pulls out a sheet of paper, and he writes down all these equations, and then starts processing these equations, and he gets down to a result, and he says, that's fine. And I thought, oh, wow. Oh, in other words, it's because of the laws of gases and these relationships implied by those laws that what I'm trying to do is impossible. And a revelation took place that moment when I saw that these symbols, when properly and logically worked with understanding, and could actually predict the mechanisms of reality. And then I realized that all my work and sweat and experimental expertise couldn't replace the theoretical knowledge or substitute for it. And I started to realize that these symbols and these theories of phenomena that are abstract are more interesting than the actual physical mechanisms on the table. And this led me straight away into mathematics. It's like this, I had this light bulb go off in my mind that said, mathematics is essential, you've got to learn it now. You would not have wasted weeks on this project had you known this little tidbit of mathematical reasoning that this excellent professor had showed me. If I'd known that, I would have done something differently. So I started studying math much more intensely, and I began to really ace my math classes too. I mean, a switch went off, and I just said, I've got to learn this stuff. I've got to learn it well. So I was by that time, incidentally, up at that time, I was a very poor student. I was basically a flunk out. I mean, because I was absorbed in what I was doing over in my own lab. I was working on chemical processes and exciting ideas that were entertaining to me, and I'd work on those things, and I was writing and studying math, and not math, but chemistry. And then I realized I had to study math. And I couldn't learn that stuff on my own, by the way. It was too hard. I mean, I looked at some of these math books, and it was just too much. So I became a good student. I mean, an absolute straight A student from that day right up to when I graduated from college. I had just about a 4.0. I think I got a couple bum grades once in a while, but hardly ever. It's just that I realized this was essential. It was the way to go. So I started studying math. Of course, I kept an interest in chemistry, and I ultimately thought that I was going to become a chemist. So I went to college. I went to DVC over here, the junior college in Egl Valley. And because I didn't have any money, by the way, when I was you guys' age, I had $5 to my name. That was it. I mean, I was really poor. So I went to DVC and took a couple math classes, took a chemistry class, some English classes and so on. Did pretty good. And pretty soon, some math teachers started, kind of patting me on the back. They were saying, I hear good things about you, and it was like, they were really very encouraging to me. And the chemistry teachers, on the other hand, I went to the chemistry stockroom. One of the things that chemistry students do is they work in the stockroom or wherever they get some kind of experience, clean up a lab or whatever. So I wanted to work for the chemistry department. So I went over there and I asked them, hey, I'm a chemistry major. I really like this stuff and I want to work for you guys. And they said, get lost. So I didn't even ask the math department. They came and asked me. They said, we've been hearing so many good things about you. Would you like to, be a math tutor in our math lab? And I said, absolutely. And they set me up doing that, and it was like, these guys like me. And this is a pretty nice way of doing business. This is mathematics, actually. It's really fun. It's very interesting, and these guys like me. Chemistry people don't like me. I think I'll study math. and then, of course, I started studying physics around the same time, and the physics people were very interesting, too. And then I went up to Cal State Hayward and studied more math and had some incredible experiences in developing my appreciation of real abstract mathematics. Up to then, it was like everything was, calculus and cut and dried, pretty simple stuff, really, and nothing really totally bizarre. Everything was straightforward. When I went to Cal State Hayward and took my first abstract algebra class with the wonderful Dr. Maris, who has recently retired, I had a complete change of mind again. I realized this is so different. I had no idea. I had no idea what mathematics could do and what it was about. When you started studying groups, rings, and fields, and that's just for starters. And I switched from being a chemistry major, then for a while I thought I was a physics major, and then I became a math major. Because I just really started getting into it. And I was always teaching along that way. In other words, I was always tutoring, and I spent, every year of my life from about the 5th grade to the present, I've always been teaching something. So it's kind of like that is always a part of my whole way of thinking. And incidentally, and you guys have heard me say this before, when you want to understand something, you want to explain it. That's the connection. That's how it works. And since I was always explaining things, that's how I understood everything too. It was that connection, that synergy.